Can you? Yes. Right. Hello, welcome to all of you. I'm really impressed that you all came out on a winter's night and everything else. My name is Jenny Towler. I'm the Vice Chair for the Shoreham Society. And I'm just going to do a few introductory notices. This hustings has been organised by the Shoreham Society and the Future Ada Schools team FAST. And it's been with the support of Area, Flock, Shoreham by Sea, Shoreham Community Trust, Shoreham Churches Together, and I have to say a lot of help from Extinction Rebellion. Now this is, all in all, is a very wide spectrum of Shoreham residents, and we've all come together to give a fair opportunity for the candidates and the community to have their say. So I'm very glad to see Leslie Grove-Williams from the Greens, Tim Loughton, Conservative, Lavinia O'Connor, and the new kid on the block, Ashley Ridley, from the Liberal Democrats. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Alistair Reid, my compadre in this chance hustings, and he's from FAST, and he will tell you what the format is and get everything rolling. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. So yeah, I'm Alistair Reid with FAST. So just, I won't go into who we are, other than we're just about creating safer school places for kids, basically. There's been a lot of pressure on schools lately. School spaces, so that's our main reason for being. That's literally all I'll say. But we've done lots of things. Check us out on the website. Check us out on the Facebook group if you want to have a look. It's a funny way to spend your birthday. Yes, it was the only date available, and my wife, I will be giving wife. But anyway, so the format of this evening. So thank you so much for waiting. I know you've all been sitting here for like a good 40 minutes. It's probably the biggest hustings that Shoreham's never had. So thank you all for reference and getting involved. At the end of the day, it's about democracy. The format is, first hour, we're going to cover a lot of questions on education, health and environment. They're kind of some of the interests of some of the people who are kind of organising the hustings. Going to break. And second hour, it's just like anything goes, basically. All the questions have been submitted in advance, so some people by email, some people in the foyer, and making sure we'll have a chance. And if you want to have another go in the break, there will be people able to send questions as well. Basically, the process is we've had a kind of balanced team of people who are sifting all the questions and basically making sure that it's all that there's a good spread and there's good interest in the questions, and everyone gets to have a say really. So, and the format is we're going to ask 3 questions at a time, just because otherwise it gets a bit dull if you have one question and then you kind of get the same answer again. And the candidates got 90 seconds, and they can choose whether they which question they answer, whether they answer with 3 or whether they just choose to focus on one. It's not a question time format, it's not confrontational, we're trying to avoid all that, so it's basically, they get pretty much free run of it, and it's up to you to judge, basically. What else? So, house rules, so we love passion, this matters, it matters to all of us, right, politics, so passion is great, but abuse will not be tolerated, okay, and if anyone is abusive, no strikes are out, okay, so passion is good, and also we can manage it might be difficult, but what I would like to aim for is kind of formal skills. Even if you disagree with someone, you respect them having a different point of view. You try and show some empathy, and you speak your truth. Okay. If those three things are present, you have a good answer. Okay. Phones off. Obviously, that's all that, and we're off. So the first thing I'm going to do, all the candidates are going to have 1 minute pitch, and then we'll get into the questions themselves. And when I call the questions, have a name. So if you're named, put your hand up, and then a mic will come to you. We'll ask 3 questions in one go, and then we'll get into it. Okay, all clear? Let's go. So over to Leslie.
Sorry, that was no personal accusations there. Okay, Al, tell me when the timer starts.
Okay.
I should just start talking, shouldn't it?
Ready?
So,
go.
I am here tonight to tell you that the Green Party offers the full package. As your parliamentary candidate, I have 3 priorities. Firstly, I want to take the radical action that our planet so desperately needs. The next 10 years will be the most important time there has ever been to tackle the climate crisis with the speed and the scope which the science demands. Secondly, I want to reverse austerity so that everybody in this, the 5th richest nation in the world, can thrive. And thirdly, I want a people's vote on the terms of any Brexit proposal. And I want this to be based on an honest assessment of the implications and not on false promises and what we now know were outright lies. Tonight, I want to tell you that a Green vote is a positive choice, and it's an important and urgent choice. We've only got the other parties claiming a Green agenda because of the millions of brave Green voters who've taken a stand for their values over the decades. But now we need to turn those words into action, and to do this, we need you to join us, to change the voting habits of a lifetime. Our planet can't vote, our children can't vote, but you can. So please, vote Green in 2019.
So thank you, and firstly thank you to all those groups who've brought this together. I like doing hustings. It's a shame because this election has come about at short notice that we don't have more hustings, so I'm glad it's a fantastic turnout here this evening. I just want to mention 3 issues. I've been the MP here for some time. I hope whether you agree with my politics or not, that you appreciate that I am a roll up your sleeves and accessible MP. That's why I stand out every Saturday morning, mostly in rain, sleet, snow, or whatever, to be as accessible to constituents. But for me, the 3 main issues. Nationally, I'm afraid we've got this election because of Brexit, and we have got to bring this to a resolution. The continuing delay and uncertainty is hugely damaging to business, and it's hugely undermining to all of us who see the shambles that we've had. That's the national issue. Locally, my big issue over recent months, and I'm glad that we've now got a much better settlement, is fairer funding for our schools, where West Sussex in particular had done so badly for so many years, and the increases we're going to be getting per pupil next year at last bring some fairer funding, and we need to go further. But the biggest issue, and it's Leslie's issue as well, and I hope it's all of our issue, is the global climate emergency. We need to do a lot more, a lot faster, and we'll go into detail about that question.
Lavinia.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and it's wonderful to see so many people here because it gladdens my heart to now think that politics is back on the agenda in East Burnley and Shoreham. I'm here to say today that this isn't a one issue, a general election. It's not about Brexit. It's actually about the future of our country and what kind of country you want to live in. What kind of country we want our children to be brought up in, and what kind of country and what kind of people we want to develop here. One of the most important things we have is to encourage our children to be properly educated. Children need a safe, secure roof over their head. Families need to be earning sufficient money to keep them from poverty. In this constituency alone, 1 in 4 children live in poverty. Only the Labour Party can bring things together. And the most important issue, as Leslie and Tim have alluded to, is the climate. The Labour Party brought forward the Climate Emergency Bill in Parliament. We believe this is the most important thing. Vote Labour, because we are the only people who have the solution.
For Liberal Democrats.
Hello, so as many of you know, I'm Ashley, I'm 18 and I'm standing for Liberal Democrats. Now, a lot of people have asked me during this election, why at 18 do you want to come into politics, especially when it's so toxic? And that's exactly the reason. Politics has got to a level where you can't have a conversation, you can't have a debate, you can't talk about different opinions, and this has been a big problem. So, as your potential next MP, one of the three things I want to do to change that. The first thing is get a proportional voting system, which means you have a system which your vote accounts for your party that you believe in. That means that no longer do you need to tactically vote for anyone. It means you get to vote for the party that has your values at heart. As well as that, giving 16-year-olds the right to vote. Now, this is something that's been fundamentally ignored by all parties. And also, the last issue is a people's vote on a legally binding confirmation vote. This is it. You know, that will finish it up. If we vote to remain, we remain. If you vote to leave, we will leave. And that's why I'm standing as your Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate.
Just in case anyone's checking it, I gave everyone 1 minute 20 there because then again, it's fair to give them a chance to get to the end of their first speech. So, thank you guys. We're on to the first question. So if you can put your hand up if you are Pat Sham, Martin Quinnell and Paula Wilson, and the microphones will come to you. So one down here, Pat Sham, Martin Quinnell, here, and Paula Wilson. Paula here. Okay. So we're going to have 3 questions at a time. So Pat, do you want to start?
Yes. Hello. My name is Pat Sham. What I want to know is there is an increasing public health crisis with rising infant mortality and life expectancy is stalled. And I would like to know what each party would offer public health services.
Okay. Martin?
Yeah, my local GP practice, Northbourne, has had its books closed to new patients for the last about 6-7 weeks, maybe longer. There's a lot of new building going on down by the river. If any of the candidates are in office, what would they try to do to ensure that local services and the wider NHS are properly resourced?
Did we find Paula? Is Paula here? Oh, okay, all right. So the question is, the last 10 years of austerity have decimated NHS services. What do you think is the number 1 priority for improvement in services for local? So basically says what's your number 1 priority for improvement of services for local? health questions or NHS. I'm going to rotate the order, so
Okay, let's deal quickly with each of those. So public health, I think we need to do a lot better on public health. I was not convinced when public health responsibility was given to local government because I don't think they have the expertise to do it. So for example, on health visitors, a really important part of the preventative health agenda. Under the coalition government, we've recruited an additional 4,200. It was a pledge which we gave in 2010, which we actually fulfilled. They do really good stuff about working with parents, with new babies, about bonding, attachment, which is so important in those early mental health problems that can be created if you don't. We need to, we've been losing some of those health visitors, we need to get them back. The biggest health priority for me is on mental health, and we've not done. One reason I set up a dedicated mental health website locally with an awful lot of information for local people as to where to go, what services are available, how the law works and everything else. If you are a 15 or 16-year-old suffering from some form of depression, there is a 99% chance that your mum had some form of perinatal mental illness when she was pregnant. That is a simple link that we have got to do so much better earlier on, making sure we've got children who are well attached to parents. And absolutely, we need more GPs. We have failed to recruit more GPs, particularly around here, not because there's not the money for GPs. We've identified new surgeries on Shoreham Beach, for example, which is identified as part of the new build for GP surgery. There were not the GPs to fill it. We're now going to have a new state-of-the-art health centre behind Worthing Town Hall, which I hope will attract GPs to this part of the country because we desperately need more.
I just had a message in from the live stream saying, can you speak up? so not from here, I can't. There's people in the lobby, but yeah, so okay, so thank you, Lavinia.
On the first question, it is devastating that the child mortality rate is now increasing in 2019 to the fact that I think it's below what it was at the turn of the century, which is absolutely appalling. But one of the reasons for that we've got to look at is the actual funding for public health has decreased by 60% for local authorities. So you cannot cut budgets without having a devastating effect on the people who need that help. That is one of the and these cuts have come from central government. So on the one hand we're saying it's terrible, but on the other hand some people are still voting for these cuts to go through. So we need to take responsibility for these cuts. And the Labour Party obviously are going to have a national care service for England, which will join up the dots on all these services, and we will be ensuring that this is properly funded. It is really important that our care is given from cradle to grave. In terms of the why we can't have doctors and nurses, it's unbelievable it can't recruit to these, because one of the things is, especially for doctors, they don't want to come into the National Health Service. Not that they don't believe in it, it's just that the culture now is such that it's driving doctors away. This must change.
Ashley.
So on the first question of the NHS crisis, I think it boils down to a lot of issues. You can't pin it down to one issue. A big issue is obviously the cuts, but it's also the fact that we have a two-party system, and both of those two parties have been in majority control for at least the last 100 years between them. And it's too much of infighting and arguing in politics. The two parties need to work together because they're the biggest parties in this country, and unless we have electoral reform, that's not going to change. They need to work together to properly fund the NHS and stop slagging each other off. I think that's the biggest thing that I've noticed as a young person. I'm so used to seeing Labour and Conservatives slag each other off about overspending, cuts, but none of them are acting. And if we don't act soon, the NHS will no longer be there. which is the biggest thing that we have in our country, and it's the thing that makes me most proud to be British. So that's my answer for that question. On the GP surgeries, it's one of those things we struggle to recruit GPs. We don't give them the proper money, we don't help them out. They should be funded more in services, but we should also look at ways that we can make it more appealing to young people, because I know as a young person I didn't want to come into work as a GP because I've seen it be cut. We need to make it more appealing to young people. And on the last issue, the service that I think is the most important is the NHS, and it's as simple as that.
So the NHS is in crisis because of the systematic, cynical underfunding by a government whose health ministers have been committed to selling it off. The NHS has been the envy of the world, and we will fight to ensure it's driven by patient care and not for profit. Labour laid the foundations for privatisation. The Lib Dems helped push through the hated Health and Social Care Act, and the Tories have put in the final nails in the coffin for the NHS. And it does not have to be like this. The Green Party has a plan to save our health service. We want to reverse privatisation. We want to give the NHS a funding injection that will pull it back from the brink. 6 billion a year for 10 years, not only for 5. We want to make it the best health service in the world. I've worked in 31 countries, and I've always been asked about how proud I should be about our NHS model. Infant mortality should not be a conversation we are having in this country right now. And it's also about who we value. Who does this country value? Because we're undervaluing our health staff, and that is not okay. We want to fight for health staff to be paid decent wages on proper terms and conditions. It can't be right that health professionals who we've trained and ancillary staff see better ways to make a living outside of the NHS. Now, statistics from the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and this is really important, do listen to this, show that in 2018-19, since Brexit, we've had a 90% fall in nurses and midwives joining the register. A 90% fall, but we've got 100,000 jobs unfulfilled and 40,000 nursing vacancies.
I will let people finish their sentence. The hit time, but I don't want to go beyond.
Does that come off my time?
Well, that's an audience decision. If you're willing to take up clapping, your time clapping, then that's up to them. Right. So thank you for that. So that's the first full round. So we're moving on to some education questions. So looking for Matthew Arnold. You can put your hand up if you're here. There, can get a mic to him. Emma Ferry. Here, and Matt Reynolds. There. So we'll start with Matthew Arnold.
Hello there. What will your party do to alleviate the shortage of primary and secondary school places in the Shoreham area?
Okay, so shortage of places. Emma Ferry.
Yeah, I'd like to know what your plans are for special educational needs funding, bearing in mind that numbers of children with SEND is increasing, the complexity of need is increasing, and funding is causing local authorities to be at risk of bankruptcy.
Thank you. And Matt Reynolds.
Yeah, hi. Without some mincing words, Ofsted is a moribund organisation and has contributed to the crisis in state education. Are you committed to its abolition?
And this time it is Lavinia to kick off.
First of all, to answer Matt's question, to alleviate primary and secondary, we'll be investing in building schools because education is our priority for all children, and it should access to education is paramount for children's future. In terms of special needs, this has been the greatest disgrace really in the education system. that no funding has been ring-fenced to ensure that special needs children are brought into the education system. We will ensure in our national education sector that we will provide education for all children so that they are part of our community and play the part they deserve to be in. And it is a shame that this has happened to our children. And in terms of Ofsted, we have already said in our manifesto that Ofsted will be disposed of because our schools are not just a breeding ground for children to pass exams. Our schools are there to nurture, nourish and bring out the best in our children. And Ofsted have been horrendous in stopping that happening. So we will be getting rid of Ofsted.
Ashley.
Okay, so on the first issue of shortages of school places, we will obviously put more money into funding education and building more schools, but also when there's new housing developments, at the moment we're seeing lots of houses going up and there's no schools attached to planning, and I think that's awful. And there's quite a lot of cases where it starts off that you're supposed to have schools attached to lots of building and there isn't that provisions, and you need the infrastructure with new builds in housing across the country, not just here. Also, on the plans for Ofsted and its abolition, I completely agree. I think we should get rid of it. The Lib Dems have in their policy that we replace it with a H&M, so Her Majesty's inspection. And in this, it will be taken into account the welfare of the teachers and the students, the environment that they're learning in, and also taking into account their mental health as well. And that's going to go into the way we judge schools on their performance. So it's not judged on their academic abilities and levels that they get, it's judged on their enjoyment at school, how they deal with bullying, and how they further improve themselves as a person. Because for young people to grow up in school and be bullied and not have the support they need, as well as the constant pressure to get good GCSEs, to get good results, that needs to stop. We need to be looking at their welfare as well as their performance. So that's what we do as Lib Democrats.
It's Leslie.
Yeah, so we've repeatedly had in repeat manifestos a commitment to abolishing Ofsted. It goes back to what I was saying about nurses. It's who do we value in our society? And if we can't value the people who are raising our children, we've got a real problem. So we would actually abolish Ofsted and trust our teachers to be able to know what is the right thing for the children that are in their classroom. So that has been a long-standing manifesto commitment. SEND is at such a crisis point. It's totally unacceptable and it drives me mad. I had a friend in tears who's got a SEND child and cannot get access to the resources they need. And this should be an absolute basic. And I've been getting loads of emails. It's actually been one of the most amount of emails I've had in my inbox from constituents has been around SEND children. So we would make sure that there's appropriate support in the classroom for those who want it in the classroom, but we would also ensure there's access to specialised schools for children and parents who prefer that option. Because at the moment that you have to fight, you have to go to court, you have to go to the High Court to get your child to have access to specialist schools. And what that means is the parents who can afford that fight, they go for that fight. And the parents who can't afford that fight, they can't have that fight. And if you're a parent of a SEND child, you also don't necessarily have the energy for that fight. And you should not be having to have that fight again in the fifth richest country in the world. So I was a school governor, I'm an associate school governor now, I'm a parent, I come from a long line of teachers, and I know that schools are absolutely at crisis point. I mean, you've raised three important issues, but it's a much bigger question. We have the largest classroom size in the developed world. Right? How can a child learn when there's 36 other children in that classroom? How can a teacher teach when there's 36 children in the classroom?
Okay, school places. So we will need additional schools. There's a new primary school already planned, which is looking for a site. One has been identified. I'm trying to get that speeded up. As secondary schools have been victims of their own success, so Shoreham Academy, which we know is King's Manor, I used to get loads of complaints about people not wanting their children to go to King's Manor. Now I get lots of complaints from people who can't get their children into Shoreham Academy. Now we've had lots of discussions with Alistair's group and others about the spare places at the Sir Robert Woodard Academy. Many Shoreham children are now going over to the Sir Robert Woodard Academy. At some stage in the next few years, we will need an additional secondary school as well, but not at the expense of taking spaces away from Sir Robert Woodard Academy, which is on a really good trajectory at the moment. So it needs to be done in a balanced way. What I don't think is a good idea is, as part of the new Monks Farm development, which I oppose, a new single-form primary school there, next to the most polluted, most congested road in the area, which I think is completely nuts. I would rather see, and I'm working with some of the other schools, to see that money, which at last Brighton and Hove Albion is going to stump up, going to expanding other existing schools or finding a new location away from a busy, polluted road. We are putting an additional £14 billion into education over the next 3 years. West Sussex schools, every school in this constituency will be getting a real terms increase, above average increases, because we have lagged behind for so long. That is a really good start, and the sorts of levels that we are going to be getting are the sorts of levels that heads and governors told me we needed when I got all of them together last year and when we lobbied heavily to get this extra funding.
I haven't got a full set for another education book up. I'm going to take one from Katie Beadle. Katie?
Would you agree the safe walking route for a school child should include hazards such as speed of traffic, lack of lighting and pollution? As you've just said, the A27 is highly polluted, and an 11-year-old is expected to walk an hour's journey to the school from Shoreham to Lancing alongside the A27.
Okay, and then so this time we start with Ashley, I think.
So on that point, I agree. Yes, the school's safe walking route should include the speed that cars are travelling at, the pollution, and also just how accessible it is for children to get to school. Because I know lots of new schools, that are built, it's hard for children who are getting the placements there to get there. There's not adequate bus routes. There's not adequate walkways in some places. I think we need to take all of that into consideration. So it's more of a general look at safe walks to school. I think there's no point in building a school where the children are finding it hard to get there, because that school isn't going to get the maximum capacity it can get. So we need to look at it as a broad picture, as well as these three very important issues.
Okay. We do short, because there's only one question, we do short time, so Ridley?
That's not a safe walking route. Full stop. We know that area, so we're talking about children who are walking from Shoreham to Robert Woodard's school. That is not a safe walking area. There is no fully accessible cycle route. We know that it's one of the most polluted stretches of road that we've got in the area. We know at times when it's gridlock, it goes over the legal limits. You have children with asthma cycling past that gridlock. Polluted, hideous area is not what we want from our kids. Kids who are going the other direction to Shoreham Academy, they're going down Middle Road. My son cycles there every day. Every day I'm worried about it. And I know drivers are worried about it. So no, we do not have safe access to school for our children, whichever secondary school they're going to.
I agree. I have serious concerns about the route to Sir Robert Woodard, and as part of the new Monks Farm development, as part of what eventually happens, that's another story altogether, on the A27, there must be safe walking routes and cycle routes as well. In the meantime, the school has been laying on additional buses, not enough additional buses, and particularly not enough additional buses for kids to be doing the after-school stuff that's so important part of the school day as well. So I agree, there is a problem, it's not perfect. We need to make sure kids can get there safely because there's a really good school.
Thank you. Right. Lavinia.
Well, surely child safety should be at our utmost. No child should be walking to school when it's not a safe route.
So obviously this route isn't safe and it shouldn't be. Why are we not thinking about providing free buses for children to get to school? Why is that not? That's exactly how we should be going with it. If children have to travel, we should be supporting their education by giving them transport to get to and from school.
Hopefully bypass in addition to that, which is there's a public consultation going on at the moment, literally about cycling and walking in Ada, and it's available online. Like, it'd be great to get as many people as possible. It includes school routes, includes walking routes. There's, you know, we've got that condition, so it's going to be part of the solution. So have a look at that and do the survey. All right, lovely, thank you guys. We're going to move on to environment, and we had a lot of questions on environment, but going to ask for Lena Clark. Can you put your hand up? Lena Clark there. Claudia Fisher at the back, and John Harris. John Harris, is he here?
John couldn't get in.
Okay, couldn't get in, all right. Yeah, okay, all right. So, Lena.
Okay, so yeah, I'm actually calling because Lena couldn't get in either, but so Lena wanted to know, the UN said last week that countries will now have to increase their carbon cutting ambitions 5-fold if the world is to avoid warming by more than 1.5 degrees C, which we know is catastrophic. What will you do in the next 5 years to cut UK carbon emissions?
Great, thank you. And Claudia?
With young people left no option but to miss school in order to strike for a future, and bad news daily on the climate and ecological emergency, do you think it's right that we decide to tackle the emergency by arguing about the end date rather than the start date? So David King, climate change advisor to Blair, Brown, Cameron, May and Covenant governments, says we should have started years ago. When do you think we should start, and what would that look like? What is your plan?
Okay, great, lovely. Thank you. And John Harris here. So, with a desperate situation regarding climate change, environmental catastrophe coming towards us in a relatively short time, how can the government justify allowing 650 houses to be built on the local floodplain? Including like superstore and warehouses, as well as other developments causing transport chaos, air pollution, and increased danger of flooding. Right. Okay. So, so this time, I guess is it Ashley to start? No, sorry. Back to Leslie. Sorry. Yeah. That's on the way.
Thank you. At the Hustings in 2017, I was candidate. There was not one single question on the environment. Okay, not one. So brilliant. We're here. When should we have started? We should have started decades ago when the Green Party and other climate activists started talking about it. So we're not arguing about the end date. We're very clear. It's 2030. We have a costed manifesto on 2030. We're the only ones who have that. So we're not going to quibble about that one. The point of no return is no longer over the horizon. It is in sight and hurtling towards us. This is what my former boss, now Secretary General of the UN, said just today. So from the Arctic to the Amazon, the world is on fire. Scientists told us it was 10 years. David Attenborough was on the radio last week telling us it was much less. The emergency requires us to rise up and to be our best. An opportunity not just to avert disaster, but to rethink the whole way that we organise ourselves as a human species. So our century is only 19 years old. And I'm saying this because on the doorstep, people are still telling me there's no such thing as a climate emergency, okay? I'm hearing that time and time again. Our century is only 19 years old, and we've already had 18 of the hottest summers on record. As a coastal community, we are on the front line of the climate crisis. Rising sea levels will affect all homes on the shoreline. We're talking about all these developments, nice cycle paths. They will be gone. We've all seen the decline in our environment and our sea. Our roads have dangerous levels of air pollution. Plans to build on the floodplain are ludicrous. 1 in 7 species in the UK is in danger of extinction. We need more questions on the environment, like answer properly.
So the questions were, what would you do, what's your plan, and about floodplains.
Okay, this is the big issue that should and can and will unite us all. We can talk about dates and we can talk about particular policies, but we all know, I hope now, that this has got to be taken really, really seriously. Now, a lot of things have happened in this country in the last few years. We are leading the way, but we've got to lead the way so much faster. The fact that we now generate 37% of our electricity from renewables, up from 6% just 9 years ago, is a great start, and Rampion is part of that. We have got to do so much better than that. So some of the targets that we've got to make sure that new build houses by 2025 are not being fossil-fuelled heated, but also the issue about New Monk's Farm. I oppose New Monk's Farm because I think that's a stupid place to build houses. I absolutely oppose IKEA because putting the retailer that has the single largest customer using cars to go to shop there, 2 million customer journeys, is absolutely crazy, adding to the congestion on the A27 and the air pollution. That should be a high-tech, high-skilled science park with high-skilled jobs that only involves 2 million customers going there every year, for example. At the same time, we have got to produce more houses, and part of the housing crisis is because we have not allocated enough housing over the last few years. I believe in new towns. Rather than trying to fill in every gap that we've got in Shoreham or Lancing, creating that extra congestion, we need new towns in areas where we can have the infrastructure to link them up as well.
Lavinia.
Oh, right, okay. Thanks for that, Tim. I think what we need to say about New Monk's Farm, it's ridiculous building anything on a floodplain. And I understand that you were against it, Tim, but the Tory council actually voted. And over the past few weeks, we have seen the flooding that's taking place within it, even within my ward in Southland, so much flooding over. So I think no to building on a floodplain, yes to more houses in an area where it's appropriate, but not there at New Monk's Farm, and definitely no to IKEA. In terms of what we're going to do to cut the carbon emissions, we need to look at actually where this all happens, because governments nationally and corporations must take account for that. Our green industrial revolution, which is coming, is saying that everyone is responsible from the very top. So everything that's happening now should be accounted for and taken into climate emergency that's happening. We, the Labour Party, were the party that actually announced the climate emergency in Parliament and brought that forward. But it is quite disgraceful, a 16-year-old to tell us what to do. And I think, let's learn from her and let's get this started.
Ashley, so we've got, what will you do, what's your plan, and what about the floodplains?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the one that's probably going to go down the least well here, but personally, I don't disagree with the Monk's Farm development, and I can give you reasons for that. And the reasons are, there needs to be jobs for areas and the community, and IKEA will provide that. We also need houses. We need houses for the community and for people to live in, so we can bring the housing prices down in the local area. Also, on the A27, it will mean that they have to improve it. That is the bottom line. You cannot build an IKEA without improving it. So it will also mean that we have to improve the railways and improve our links to the area. Now, on the other issues of on the other issues, so the country is behind on our targets. We've been spending too long, taking our time with it. What we need to do is we need to move freight back onto the railways to take heavy HGVs off the roads to stop the heavy pollutants that they are. We need to improve our railways by opening the stations that were closed by the bleachers before. We also need to make sure we also need to make sure that we're putting money into renewable energy and stop using excuses like it's not affordable. It is now affordable to use renewable energy, and we need to do exactly that.
Step 3. Caroline Drake, you put your hand up. Caroline Drake, is she here? Okay. Chrissy Gunter. Chrissy Gunter. Hasn't it? Okay. All right. Well, I've got a question from originally from Sarah Kemp, and then okay, and Heather Godfrey. Heather Godfrey's at the other back there. So I think it's because some people couldn't get in, they've had to ask proxies basically. So is Caroline Drake here, or shall I do
Carolyn? Yep.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So Caroline, you start.
Thank you. I bought solar panels when the feed-in tariff made it accessible for me. I'm very grateful to it. It would no longer be viable for me to do so because the feed-in tariffs have been almost abolished. What would your plans would be to make renewable energy accessible for people on an average income?
AKA Chrissy Gunter. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I am asking this on behalf of Sarah Kemp, who unfortunately also couldn't get in. Right, Sarah's question is, the National Farmers Union president says that half of this year's potato crop is rotting in the ground because of floods. We keep talking about food insecurity in relation to Brexit, but with climate change already affecting our crops, what would your party do to make sure the UK is fed?
Okay, thank you. And Heather Godfrey.
What are your party's plans to halt fossil fuel extraction and use in this country, and by when?
Right, solar panels, and 99% of all solar energy in this country has been installed in the last 9 years. It has been a terrific success, but we need to make sure we are subsidising those parts of renewable energies that need the most subsidy to get them off the ground. That has happened. So on onshore wind power, our capacity for onshore wind power has increased from 7.5 terawatts to 30.5 terawatts in the last 10 years. We need more. We need more offshore wind power like Rampion. Rampion could well be expanded. We also need to invest in technologies. So, for example, we have a really interesting new company on Lancing Business Park that has devised a paint coating that can actually break down greenhouse gases and fumes from cars into harmless elements. That is the sort of technology that is going to help us on greenhouse gases emissions, and that's where we should be concentrating the subsidies, the state interventions to help that come along. On fossil fuel, we are phasing out coal-fired energy by 2025. We went for a record period this year without generating any of our electricity from coal-fired power stations. As I said, we're up to 37% from renewables. We need that to be up at much nearer 100% in a matter of years. I think we are going to get there, but we can't get there fast enough. So let's just actually look at the things that have happened over the last few years. Let's agree that we are going in the right direction, but let's, for goodness sake, make sure we can get to our destination faster. And it's not just in this country. We've actually contributed 5.7 billion to helping climate change in developing countries as well, who are absolutely part of the equation.
So it was about making renewable stuff affordable, make sure we're fed, and about fossil fuel extraction. What are your plans, Lavinia?
To make to make solar panels viable, or to make any kind of energy viable, one of the things that we will be doing in Labour Party is nationalising it to make sure that everyone gets the profits back from the huge companies. Also, what we're looking at here is that we, at an island, we have lots of resources to be able to have energy. Tim has alluded to offshore turbines, but we're looking at 7,000 new offshore turbines. We're also looking at 2 new offshore wind turbines. And one of the things we will be doing about about fossil fuels is, sorry? No, sorry, I did not.
Can you not shout out?
Yes, thank you. In terms of fossil fuel, obviously fossil fuel is not good and we need to get rid of it, but one of the things we will be doing is banning any fracking, because that is just unacceptable. About feeding our nation, it is disgraceful that potatoes are lying because of the flooding, and we need to seriously do something about flooding, and we will be investing further in flood prevention, not just in coastal areas but in other areas. But we also need to make sure that we've got the people here to be able to pick the potatoes, and a hard Brexit won't allow that.
So on the first point of making renewable energy affordable for the ordinary people, I think it's really important that we start giving people subsidies so they can choose to have renewable energies, because currently it's not an option. It's not out there for people to be able to afford to put solar panels on their houses, and it's a shame because that will make a massive difference to our carbon output. Also, we want to retrofit all homes, the new and old, so they do not have any carbon emissions. So this will help with that as well. And this, I think, should be done as much as possible at the expense of the government, because we should be making sure that people are not in poverty, through fuel poverty, and also the environment is not being damaged. On the issue of the renewable energy and using it instead of fossil fuels, I think we need to look at making sure the national grid is 80% renewable energy. This will then take out the need for fossil fuels and extraction. It means that there'll be no need for the companies. So this will mean rapid investment in green energy and in green industry, and also providing a route for young people to go into those jobs so people aren't losing their jobs. It's not about nationalising it, it's about making it accessible to everyone, and so it's a job opportunity for everyone. As well as this, we will look to stop funding fossil companies, because a lot of government money goes towards big corporations that are drilling for fossil fuels and oil.
So all the above, plus plus. Because all the above is just not enough. It's not good enough. It's not going to take us where we need to go. So all the above. But the irony here, let me just say, is actually you can buy relatively cheap solar panels from IKEA. But we're not going to have IKEA, are we? But anyway, there is a bit of good news here, because just today I found out, I was reading in the newspaper, that actually insurance companies are starting to refuse to insure coal companies. So that's a really good thing. So actually we might find that they're going to have to degrade that way. But what are we going to do? So first of all, we will remove the subsidies to oil and gas. It's completely unacceptable that they're highly subsidised while our solar panels aren't. It's also a social justice issue, because if you have solar panels, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford to get them when we did, I actually get a cheque through the post. I actually have totally free energy. I only use energy during the daytime when I can. So it's actually for people on low income, it's an amazing opportunity, and all new homes, all council homes, all affordable housing, all homes should have the luxury of actually having solar panels. So we would put a carbon tax on fossil fuels, and that's actually how we're going to fund a lot of our Green New Deal. So that tax, we're going to increase it progressively, because I don't know if any of you were hearing on the radio, one of the questions you had to ask people was actually, if you were to stop subsidising, what would happen to all those jobs? We'd already thought of that, it was already in here. So over 10 years, we're going to have a carbon tax, and during that time, we're going to reskill people who work in the carbon industry so that they're able to be reskilled to work in the renewable industry, so there'll be a smooth transition, no job losses, win-win.
I'm going to take we've got through the questions that are on the paper. We've got a few more minutes left before the break, so I'm going to take a risk and take a couple of questions from the floor. Yeah, okay, one there and one other. But try if we can keep them to the topics, which are environment, education, NHS and education of this section. Okay, that's the two. Okay, they're in there. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah.
Right.
Hey, there you go.
Can I say your name?
My name's David Kinchat. One of the things, great issues I've got with this in the environmental stuff, none of you address the elephant in the room, and that is the increasing population of the human race. As a species, we are far too successful. So I'm afraid, unless we,
What's the question?
Well, basically, how do we stop the human race? I mean, it is not stop it, but we've got to reduce it. You can make all the green you want. We've got too many people for this planet. This planet should be 75% bigger than it is to sustain the world's population now.
Okay, thank you. All right, and there's one here, right?
I'd like to take us back to public health and the origins of public health, and particularly Mr. Loughton's comments. Public health started in local authorities. They were the people that discovered that what you needed was a toilet in each home in order to cut infection. They were the people who have run huge campaigns on HIV and AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases. It doesn't matter where they sit. I don't know that they care where they sit, whether they sit in local authorities, which is where they started out, or whether they sit within the National Health Service. I think what public health needs, and I'd like to hear your views on proper funding, because we desperately need them to keep us safe and well.
So what's the question?
The question was, do you think they need proper funding, not an argument about where they sit?
Who needs proper funding?
Public health.
Okay, fine. Okay, cool. Okay. All right. So, Lavinia, I think you'll start off. So basically, yeah, we're going to do about increasing population and funding of public health.
Right. How do we decrease the population? Just don't do anything about the climate emergency. 10 years it'll be all over with. I honestly don't think that we're an overly populated island. There's lots of places in this country which are unpopulated. The southeast coast is overpopulated, but there are lots of swathes of country that are not. And I don't think it's up to the government to tell people when to have children or not to have children. Because if this is happening in China, there would be loads of complaints about it when there's the one-child policy. So it's not increasing children that they're responsible for climate change. It's irresponsible governments and irresponsible corporations that are responsible for that. And that's what must change. In terms of public health, it is disgraceful about how the public health sector isn't getting enough funding. But one of the primary things about that is because it's not joined up. We must join all our health, and that's what we're saying. We want joined up care for everyone. When we're talking about earlier on about infant mortality, diseases like syphilis are now coming back, which are rife, and there's no clinics because all the clinics have been closed. And that may sound something that people don't really think about, but it's really important. Infectious diseases are now coming back, and they must be properly funded, and they must be in the communities, and they must be accessible to everyone.
Ashley?
So on the first issue of how do we stop our human race? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's a brilliant thing that we have such a diverse world with different people. I think the biggest thing is we need to educate people, because lots of people grew up in the times where coal industry was our main source of income, and there's a lot of attitude that needs to change. A lot of people find it hard that something that created power for hospitals, that created cars, that created our industries could do so much damage, and it's about educating people on this, and I think that's the way we can help the increasing population be aware of the massive effect of climate change. On the issue of public health, I think it simply needs more funding. It's been neglected. It's as simple as that. It's been neglected by successive governments of all colours, and it's time that we all get together and work together in funding it. There's no other way of putting it. Every party is responsible for this, and we need to look at ways we can solve it, and that involves working together. If I was elected, I would work with Conservative, with Green, with the SNP, anyone who wants to put more funding and services, and Labour, who wants to put funding and services into the NHS. We need to work together on this big issue.
Leslie.
Population is an issue, thank you. I mean, it is an issue. It's not something we can grasp, it's not something we can fix. It's an issue personally, my personal choice. I wanted to have a really big family. We did the research with my husband. We decided to stop at 2 so that we'd cancel ourselves out. That was our personal choice. Women's reproductive health rights right now are a battlefield. And I think it's very important we don't take that for granted. So as the Green Party, we've campaigned, and personally I've campaigned for safe spaces around abortion clinics. It's not something that we can take for granted that women have a right to control their reproductive health right. Across the world, we're seeing a return to what we call traditional values, which means get women back in the home, which means get women not controlling their sexual and reproductive health rights. So we've got a really tough one here, and I'm really glad you raised it, because we do have too big a population. Our planet cannot sustain it. And on the other hand, we do have fundamental rights that we need to protect. So I think it's something we all need to talk a lot more about, and I'm really glad you raised it. So public health, absolutely. The source of any health system is the public health. I remember as a child, I used to love going to my local community centre. My mum's here, she used to take me, and we would always go, we would see a health visitor. There'd be a health visitor, you'd see them. My kids, I don't think have ever seen a health visitor. And that's where you learn some of the real basics around public health, and you learn to not take it for granted. And I think we've started taking it for granted, and that's a huge issue. So of course the answer is yes, we need to go back to investing in our health visitors, our health workers. They're also not just for health reasons, but they're also sometimes a first point of call when there's a family in crisis. They can spot it. If we don't have them, they're not spotting it, and it's all on the schools to spot it.
Okay, in 22 years of doing hustings like this, I've never been asked the question, how are we going to stop the human race? And that is perhaps a bigger debate we're going to have. We have a very uneven spread of population in this country and in this planet. And we have got to have more sustainable ways of sustaining that population. That includes on a very local level, the way and what foods we grow. So we haven't mentioned Brexit yet. But when we're not constrained by the common agricultural policy, we might actually be able to grow the foods that are sympathetic to the local environment. But we'll come back to that actually later on. On public health, of course we need much more money in public health. And it's not, you're right, it's not a question of where it is. I just think that the very fast transition into local government hasn't worked yet. We need everybody to be working on public health agendas in local government, in the health service, in GPs and everything else. But also it's about education. And one of the biggest public health challenges we have is the impact of social media on our young people. That is a public health emergency. And we all have a responsibility to be doing much more in schools to alert kids to the dangers of misusing social media. And as social media companies who are raking in billions from hosting some severely inappropriate stuff as well need to be called to account, which is why we're going to bring in a regulator for social media companies to start with and make sure when they are consistently posting hate stuff, really unhealthy stuff, they will be called to account and fined.
Okay, right. So, that is the end of the first part. So there's going to be a 20-minute break. So we're going to start on the dot at 8:50. Okay, so be back here. If you want to ask questions for the second part, there's a question table by the door. There's loads of community groups out there. There's Shoreham by Cycle. There's Extinction Rebellion, Fast. So go and have a chat with people from there, and see you back here in 20 minutes. Okay. Thank you all for staying around and getting involved. So it's the second hour. We're going to finish as well with some 1-minute end speeches from the candidates for the final pitch. We're going to cover everything now, basically. Everything else, I should say. But we've kept Brexit back, just in case anyone's wondering, for an hour or two. Expect there might be 1 or 2 questions on that. But also on transport, on finances, about PR, about all sorts of stuff. So hopefully the format's working for you. Hopefully we're going to keep it moving, and yeah, hopefully you're learning something, and we're all getting more informed. So we're going to start off on transport. If that's all good with you. So Paul Mackay. And put your hand up if you're here. Paul Mackay. No. Paul Mackay? No. Okay, I'll ask a question. Josh Bax? Yeah, there. And Gillian Harris. So there's Josh there, and Gillian Harris? No. Okay, all right, I'll ask it. So, apparently I mumbled in the first half, is that right? It's the pleasure of online feedback. So I should try and speak slowly and clearly for these questions. So Paul Mackay, first question: if elected, what are you going to do to improve road, train, and importantly cycle routes in East Worthing? And as part of this, what transport pledges will you guarantee to improve things for local people? Josh.
Evening. Hello. United Nations guidelines recommend that governments spend 20% of their annual transport budget on enabling walking and cycling in order to help tackle issues like pollution, congestion and climate change. However, in England the spending is currently a little over 2%. What are the candidates' thoughts about how sustainable transport, and not just electric vehicles, will be treated under each party's plans?
Okay. Thank you. And Gillian Harris, if she's not here, her question was: do you think, with all the congestion on the roads and an adequate rail system, there should be a credible plan for infrastructure to be put into place before any more houses and flats are built? Okay, so who went first last one? Did you go first? I think you went first. You did, okay. All right. So, Tim.
Blimey. Right. 90 seconds for transport around here. 20 years ago, I remember we had a New Dawn for Shoreham Harbour plan, and we've had several great New Dawn for plans for Shoreham Harbour. The trouble is, none of them really involve serious infrastructure to make it possible. So we can have lots of new flats along the side of Shoreham Harbour, but it ain't going to work unless you have the infrastructure to go with it. And that is my great fear about the problem we have on the Brighton Road now. We have got to have new houses somewhere, preferably affordable new houses and flats as well. But cramping them into one of the busiest roads around here is just not going to be sustainable. And my fear then, and it's proved to come to pass, is the cherry picking of individual sites. And we put them all together, we've got several thousand new flats happening along there. And the same on the A27 as well. We have got to have an upgrade of the A27. It would be great to have the bypass, but we can't have a bypass because of the national park. So we are going to have an online route as well. It seems crazy to me that we've got all these new schemes before we've actually got the infrastructure to do it. And that's why I come back to my earlier point, that if we are to provide accommodation in the future, I believe the future is in new towns on new sites where you have the infrastructure that can be created to make them sustainable. Simply filling in the few remaining blocks of green space that we have in a crowded coastal area, of which 47% or 53% of the district of Ada is in the national park and largely can't be built on as well, is just not sustainable. And we need many more cycling routes and sustainable forms of transport. Absolutely, that's a whole evening on its own.
No one can have any doubt that the privatisation of public transport has been an unmitigated disaster for everyone. It's led to the fact that affordability is now impossible. The Labour Party yesterday announced that they would be cutting rail fares by 1/3, which will be helpful for everyone. We have a sustainable transport policies in our manifesto, and when we talk about the promoting funding available for cycling and walking, if you go to page 20 of our manifesto, it states quite categorically, we will bring together transport and land use planning to create towns and cities in which walking and cycling are best choice, safety, accessible, healthy, efficient, economical and pollution free. And that is right from the horse's mouth. So we believe that is, when we talk about planning, and it's interesting when we talk about new housing, people, when these planning applications were made, this was the first thing people talked about, was the access on the Brighton Road, how that would lead to pollution, and that's what's happened now. And now we're talking about another huge development on the Brighton Road. No, this cannot go on. Planning must take into consideration what transport is going to be like.
Okay, Ashley.
So on the first question of what would we do as a party to improve our local transport, it's fairly simple. The first one is we need to improve the A27. Having driven down it a lot in this election campaign, it is appalling in terms of the traffic, the congestion, how hard it is to get in and out of Lancing, Shoreham. I don't think it should be a chore to go to work, to travel. And I think it's something that we need to focus on, which is improving it through funding, through finding alternative routes for traffic to go on. But also we need a better public transport service, because I think it's not great, if I'll be honest. The trains aren't great, the buses, it's quite expensive. I think a lot of people will agree with that. I think with the railways, we need to really look at setting up a body that oversees what railway companies are doing and intervening when they are letting people down, and that's something the Liberal Democrats want to do. Also, on sustainable transport, it is the way forward. It's as simple as that. We need more sustainable transport, and that doesn't just include electric cars. It means more cycle paths, so people who want to use their bike to get to work can, so they're not at risk of being hit by heavy trucks, heavy lorries, cars, so they have a safe route to wherever they want to go. And that's something that we need to prioritise in the next government, is looking at funding cycle paths that are safe, so people can use their bikes to get to work, and it means that they'll pollute the planet less.
So I'm not going to refer you to page X, because we have an entire chapter called The Green New Deal for Transport. So our transport system is based on fossil fuels. Yeah, this destabilises our climate. It's unhealthy for all of us. We have increasing asthma, don't we, in our communities. It's expensive. It's costing us far too much money, and it's a very stressful form of travel. So many of the problems, and this is to answer the question about should we have a credible plan, yes we should, because many of the problems that we have with congestion, with air quality, with lack of safety, are due to the previous short-sighted patchwork solutions. We'll fix a bit here, fix a bit there. What we need is proper forward planning. We need this to be a multi-generational forward plan, 2-generation plan. And that's what's been done in countries like the Netherlands. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we need to phase out our fossil fuel vehicles, and we need to do a bit more of that long-term thinking. So electric vehicles of themselves are not going to be the magic bullet, we know that. So building new vehicles, including electric vehicles, also emits carbon. So we need to actually reduce our addiction and our reliance on cars. So to invest £15 billion in what we're calling a sustainable transport revolution. We've got a principle called polluter pays. We want the local authorities to have more control over the rail and buses, and locally we want cycle paths that are actually fit for purpose. So at the moment the cycle paths, I'm a cyclist, I cycle everywhere, they're incredibly dangerous. I'm not a car owner, but I'm lucky that I have access to a car if I need one. So when the train is cancelled with its 50% attendance time rate, I can jump into choir. I'm lucky I can do that, but we need cycle pass.
Right, so we've got questions from Adam Bronkhurst, Adam, Die Hard, is he here? Yeah, just there. And I haven't got your surname, but it looks like you asked a question in the break, Stephen. So, do you want to start? Did Stephen here ask a question in the break? Is it a handwritten question? About Brexit? All right, come back to it. Okay, start. Okay, where? There. Okay, can we get a mic to that person? Adam, do you want to start?
Hello, I just want to know what each candidate's personal opinion on Brexit was, and also avoiding a hard Brexit in December 2020 if a deal is struck.
Hello, my name's Dihad. My question is locally based and is really about the candidates' due diligence about what will happen to our local economy. My question is, can each of the candidates please name 2 businesses that will be affected by their own proposed policy on Brexit? One business who says they will benefit from the policy, the other who will not.
And Stephen.
In the event of a Tory majority, will sufficient time be allowed to properly debate and scrutinise the Brexit bill, which was agreed by Parliament but unfortunately not by the executive government?
Okay, thank you. So just to recap, so your personal opinion on Brexit, not just the party line. Can you name 2 businesses? One you think will do better, one you think will do worse as regards Brexit, and what scrutiny will there be for the bills that are going to come up through Parliament? And so this time is Lavinia, I think.
My personal opinion is that we go back to Europe when we're in power. The Labour Party, when we're elected, go back to Europe. We strike a deal with Europe which protects jobs, the environment and people's futures. We come back and we put that deal to the public together with the Remain deal. And for me, that is the best deal that we can possibly offer anyone, because the people have then a choice, and I believe in that. That may be, people may say that, but that is my personal choice. And when people say to me, I want you to back Leave or I want you to back Remain, until we actually see what the deal is on the table, it would be incumbent upon anybody not to make that decision, because we don't know what that is yet. And also, I have got to say that as an MP, obviously you've got to be guided by your people, but is it my job to impose my will on the people of my constituents? Are my constituents well aware of what they're going to be voting for? I think so. And I may have a personal opinion about what I may want to vote for, but let's see what we can come back with to make sure we get a better deal for everyone and people have a say. After 3.5 years of shambolic
Finish sentence. Okay, all right.
After 3 years of a shambolic trying to get a deal, we need to do something different now, and let's do it and put it back to the people, because I believe the people know best.
So it probably doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of you. I am quite a proud Remainer. I do not support Brexit. And the reasons for that is I was born as a European and British citizen. So I didn't get a right to vote on this, and nor did a lot of 16-year-olds who do deserve the right to vote on this. So that's where I come from. in terms of people who voted for Brexit, I think there's also an argument for another vote, because for you guys, if you voted for Brexit and you're really confident that it will be the same result, have another vote, and then we'll finish it off, and it has to be respected, and that's what I believe in. And I think the first time round there was a lot of lies, and the biggest lie was that this was a legally binding referendum. In the next one, it has to be legally binding and it has to be respected, and that's my opinion on it. on the issues of businesses affected, in my personal opinion, I've heard from lots of business owners who will be directly affected by Brexit. I think there's lots of businesses locally that will be affected because they're struggling to account for the shortfall in the economy. They're having to plan for uncertainty, which is impossible to do. So this means that people are not sure about investing in our country. So either way, Brexit is causing an uncertainty and businesses are suffering. And that's the bottom line with the businesses. So yeah.
So I'm personally very proud to believe in Europe and to want to stay in Europe. Why? I think that a lot of those arguments actually weren't very well rehearsed during the referendum. It offers, and particularly now we know about the climate emergency, being in Europe offers us the best chance to face down the big challenges of the future, from climate chaos to international terrorism. If you think about it, rising sea levels and air pollution are not going to respect national boundaries, and neither do international criminal organisations. And to stop both of these, we need close working relationships with other countries. I and Green Party members are fully committed to working collaboratively with our closest neighbours to resolve our common issues in the pursuit of peaceful and prosperous lives for all. So when I was chair of Ada Green Party, I led a number of Remain campaigns. I'm really proud about that. In my job, I work with peacekeepers from around the world, and I'm reminded day in and day out of one of the main reasons we were in the EU in the first place before it was an EU, and that was so that never again would we have war on our land. And since then, never again have we had war on our land. We have had war all around our land. We look at North Africa, we look at the former Balkans, I was in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago working with peacekeepers. They've been invaded by the Russians all around the border, all around, going up to Norway. People are defending themselves. We've had peace because we're solid, because we're the EU, and that's absolutely essential. This said, I would go for a people's vote because I actually think, say you want to move house, you know my
position.
Okay, I spent 18 months before the referendum visiting 13 different capitals, speaking to MPs, MEPs, ministers and others about how the EU could reform to make it sustainable, not just for our relationship with it, to keep us in, but for sustainable, because I just don't think the EU is going to be there in 10 years' time. It's going backwards, it's losing its share of the world economy, it's become restricted and uncompetitive. When it came to the crunch, when there was a clear and present danger of the second largest member of the EU voting a referendum to leave, they did not come forward with those reform options. And that's why I, not out of ideological reasons, took the view that coming out and working with the rest of the world, those 6.9 billion people who happen not to live within the EU, was the best route for us. Ashley has said that the uncertainty has been deeply damaging. Absolutely right. So another year of arguing what about the question of another referendum will be, the legislation will take over a year, and then has the first referendum not been divisive enough that somehow the second referendum is going to make it even better? Nonsense. We have got to get this done. You asked for a personal opinion. You asked for a personal opinion from the candidates. Lavinia's leaflet does not mention the subject of Brexit once. It also doesn't mention the subject of Jeremy Corbyn once. It's a Corbyn and Brexit-free leaflet. Our position, the Conservative Party's position, is absolutely clear. When we get a Conservative majority government, the legislation will go through in January. We will be out of the EU, and then we can sensibly sit down with our EU friends and decide on our future relationship and end the chaos and uncertainty.
So, okay, all right. So, know, I said at the beginning, I love a bit of passion, but if you shout out, you might take away time from other candidates as well. So just be mindful of that. Right, I got 2 more questions on this. They're different. They are specific. Jenny King. Is Jenny King in the room? Jenny King. Yeah, cool. And Wayne Green. Wayne Green, there's another back there as well. Okay. So Jenny.
Hi, I represent 1,300 people who are part of the Shoreham Free EU Facebook group, and we want to know what each candidate will vote if we are so lucky as to get another vote on this.
Okay. And Wayne Green.
Hello, yes. Regarding the local aid of poverty hearing and report in 2016 on young homeless teenagers, that report was read by the United Nations. What will you do to resolve the local poverty and social cleansing of the poor from the area?
Actually, Wayne, maybe I got this wrong, but there's the question I've got is a Brexit question. Did you
right, I'll put the Brexit question if you want.
Yeah, Brexit question.
Don't lose that question.
All right.
Don't lose that question.
I won't lose that question. Okay, Brexit. The UK Trade Policy Observatory and Sussex University with Chatham House report 216 briefing says the no-deal shock for Hampshire and Sussex on the output of full employment here will be a shock result of 39,000 to 43,000 job losses. What is your remarks to that?
Okay, all right. So it's basically which if there was a people's vote, second people's vote, whatever it is, then which way would you vote? And the second one is about impact of jobs in Sussex, and we're going to start with Ashley.
So I'm probably sure you can all guess my answer for if there was another people's vote. I would vote to remain. It would be my first vote, so it wouldn't change. On the no-deal shock of business, it's not really a shock. If you take us out of one of the institutions that we've been so used to, it will create a loss of jobs. And I think the biggest thing we can do is stay in the European Union, be at the table, and look for those reforms. That's what we need, and that's what we can do in Europe.
So I would vote Remain. In terms of the impact on jobs, I did a fact check after one of the debates. I've forgotten his name, Rab, one of your people. Rab. No, not Dominic Raab. The other one, the one that Boris Johnson's spokesperson, the only person who's actually coming and speaking on any of the shows. No, that's the dodgy one. Anyway, I looked at the BBC, one of the dodgy ones. I did a fact check. I did a BBC fact check on his comment there would be positive economic outcomes, and the BBC fact check said there is no fact saying there would be positive economic outcomes, said there were only negative outcomes. That's what the evidence says. So that is why I'm campaigning, and from the day the referendum came out, the Green Party mentioned the people's vote. We've campaigned for it because we want it to be based on fact. Because when you say to your family, right, I'm going to move house, let's move house, kids, yes or no? They say yes. I go off, I consult a mortgage company, I say, well, can I afford this? Actually, can I afford to have a new house? Then I talk about, well, do I want it to be inside Shoreham, outside Shoreham? Do I want a flat? Do I want a garden? I do my research, I get the evidence, I put that all on the table, and then I say to the kids and my husband, actually, was that the right decision? Do we really want to move, or do we want to stay? And that's why I want a people's vote. And I would respect the outcome of the people's vote based on fact, information, research that has been done since the referendum that wasn't done before the referendum. And I would respect the decision taken.
Let's just do an experiment. How many people in this hall actually voted for Brexit?
You're answering the questions.
So this audience isn't actually representative of the 54% of people in this constituency who voted for Brexit. So why should we have a second referendum? So why do we think so little of democracy and so little of the 17.4 million people who voted in good faith to come out of the EU that they were wrong, they were too stupid? And why would a second referendum solve that? What would the question be, for starters? What would the question be? How much longer of the uncertainty and the damaging uncertainty would there be? The referendum has caused a lot of division, and you think a second referendum is going to heal that? You're kidding.
Please don't shout out because other people can't hear the answers. Hang on.
Thanks very much. That was very interesting, actually. Pantomime season started. Oh, yes, I'll not comment in terms of comment about my my leaflets or Jeremy Corbyn, but I'm glad he's read them, because I'll put him in the place about how bad austerity has hit those people, and that's why this general election is more than just Brexit. It's about what kind of country we are going to be living in. In terms of Brexit, I am a Remainer. I back Remain, but that does not mean that I won't listen to the people who have voted to leave. And when I say, when we're in government, we'll go back to get a deal, because we've not been allowed to actually look at the deal that is now so wonderful that Boris is, because as soon as it came under scrutiny, we called a general election rather than actually look at the deal. So let's have a deal that protects workers' rights, protects European citizens here and abroad, and also protects the hard worked and the hard fought for terms and conditions we have. What I would say is the deal that would come back would need to be far improved than what we've got being in Europe. Now, can I just say something? I think it's really important that UK trade would be disastrous unless we can get a deal that protects our trade agreements with Europe, and everyone will suffer.
So that is, who knew Brexit would divide a room? We're going to move away from Brexit.
Oh no, we're not.
And we're actually going to move into mixing up some of the topics and issues. So is it me? Yes. Yes. Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to go for, they're going to be a mix of questions and a mix of topics, okay? So the first one I'm going to go for is Clive Morris. Are you here, Clive Morris? Gone? Okay, I'll ask this question. Patty Horrocks. It's not a phone. Patty Horrocks and Chrissy Gunter.
Chrissy's done that.
Thank you. Chrissy Gunter. Okay. So we're starting off. So Clive Morris's question was: since 2010, the national debt has doubled, while at the same time wages have stagnated and services have been severely cut. Where has all the money gone? That's question one. Okay. So just about debt and wages. Number two was given the breakdown. Sorry, Patty. Where's Patty? Sorry, Patty. Yeah, go, Patty.
In an era when there is severe lack of trust in most politicians and most parties, what would candidates do individually to try and restore that in this local area? What action might you actually specifically take to restore some trust in politics locally?
Okay, great. So that's something about trust in politics. And number three was from Chrissy. Should be. Can you shout it? Can you stand up and shout it? No, just you can stand up and shout it.
Okay, my question is on proportional representation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The electoral system is broken. First past the post is not appropriate for the 21st century. Many people do not even bother to vote as they feel their voices are not being heard. Smaller parties may get a lot of votes, but never ever a parliamentary seat. If you are elected, will you campaign to reform our electoral system to ensure representation for all?
So I'm kicking off with Leslie this time. So bit of a mixed bag. So debt, national debt, wages, trust in politics, and proportional representation.
Sorry, before you start timing, it's impossible to answer those 3 questions in 90 seconds.
So it is, but the deal with this is you can choose what you focus on in that 90 seconds. Okay.
Okay, PR, yes, absolutely, we must have it. Debt has doubled, where's the money gone? Excellent question. We actually have a chapter called Ending Wasteless Spending, because the money does go somewhere, isn't it? There is a choice about where money goes, and it's not the right choice, frankly. So I was talking to an engineer who works on HS2. Have you all heard of HS2? It's this big, huge, very expensive vanity project. Talking to an engineer who's quitting because it's so unethical, he can't cope with it anymore. It's such a waste of money. It hasn't even started, it's just gone into consultancy fees. All the plans to expand Heathrow, totally wrong from an environmental perspective and totally wrong from a financial perspective. So that's 2 of them. Lack of trust, it's hideous. I hate it. I'm someone, but integrity is one of my absolute core values. And honesty comes with that. And I think it really depresses me that on all these TV chat shows, it's all about not trusting politicians. And I find that deeply depressing. I don't want to be tarred with that brush, because actually I'm a really honest human being, and that is very important. I don't lie. So please, let's try not to tar everyone with the same brush. Locally, how do? We listen. We go out, we talk to people, and we listen to what they have to say. It's called active listening. We don't do it with the answers already formed in our heads, because then we have our confirmation bias, all our other biases that kick in. We listen, we hear, and we try and find a solution that's win-win. And then we don't need to lie, because then we're actually basing on actually people's realities. And that's what I would do in my community. It's what I do in my community.
Answering that in 90 seconds, the debt has gone up because we are still spending more than we are bringing in. But the annual deficit, which we inherited, was, I think, over 10%.
Okay.
The annual deficit, which we inherited, was over 10% of GDP, is now below 2% of GDP, which is why we can afford to invest in public services that were decimated because there was no money left. That's the truth of the matter. So how
okay, I'm going to ask again if you please not shout out, because you're just going to take away time from everyone's time.
It's a fact. That is the problem. Liam Byrne, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, left the note saying there is no money left. Every Labour government has left a higher rate of unemployment and lower growth. Fact, it just happens. So, how do we restore trust in politicians? And Leslie is right. And Leslie is right, because it's not in anybody's interests that politicians are not held in high regard. Now, the way we restore that, and Brexit has been part of that process, because why should people who turned out to vote in good faith, a record turnout in a national election in 2016, then when the result is not honoured, they will lose trust? That is part of the trust.
Time.
But like it or not, it is. And when you've got 406 constituencies who voted to leave, there should be at least 406 MPs who honour that referendum result, and there wasn't.
Lavinia. Can you please, I'm going to ask one more time, no shouting out, please. You can clap, you can cheer, but don't shout at the candidates, because it's just, it's a question of respect for all candidates, okay?
Right, and I'm trying my best to be very calm and civilised tonight, and I'm doing my best here. But to answer the second question about the severe lack of trust? That answer you've given, Tim, shows why there's severe lack of trust. Because you blame the last Labour government for the casino bankers that caused the crash. It's just not acceptable. And no matter how many times you repeat that, it doesn't make it right. So let's talk about what's happened since truth. And I'm with Leslie here, because one of the ways you bring trust back to people is to speak to them, to live in amongst them, to know what they're living like every day. And I do that as a local councillor in a very deprived area in Shoreham, in Southland. I see what's happening every day. I talk to people every day. And this general election has brought people out to speak about these things, which is fabulous. And trust in politics is about trust in the people and believing in their integrity, which is really important. Because if they're representing you and not corporate interests or anything else. I believe in proportional representation. Yes, I'm in favour of, because there's little doubt that our democracy is much in need of improvement. And I'll tell you who's paid. Sorry, but I think it's really important this, because wage stagnation is because it's been voted through. Voted through this. They've voted for the cuts constantly. That's the fault of this government.
Go, Ashley. Greta is just saying goodbye to you.
On behalf of Planet Earth, thank you very much for Nothing else will exist without the planet.
Okay, I'm going to... thank you. All right, Ashley, I'm going to restart your time.
Okay, so on the issue of national debt doubling, I think there's quite a few issues which haven't been brought up by Tim Loughton, which surprises me, which is subsidised meals for MPs. Since when can they be on a salary of $79,000 and not pay for their own meal? I want to know how much that costs the economy. It's a valid point. I think also expenses, that's another point. How can MPs be on $79,000, and you're one of them, Tim, and claim expenses for really silly stuff? You can pay for it yourself. $79,000 is so much money to be on. Anyway, so on restoring trust, and this is a big one, it's simply be honest. I think too many politicians have got used to lying. It's very easy to just, alternative fact seems to be the word for lying now. It's a different version of what we believe in, and that's just still lying. Another thing is working with different parties. I think the biggest thing in this election is we are very tribal, and we need to start working with different parties, no matter what party you're in. And that's the biggest thing we need. So that brings me on to PR. I absolutely support it, because people will have to work with people of different opinions. Like you talk to members of the public who don't agree with you, but they're still voting. You've got to respect their opinions, and to do that we need a proportional representation system, and also people in Parliament who represent the people of the country. A more diverse Parliament.
Okay, so next set of three kind of questions. So we've got John Street in the room. John Street is there at the back. Can we also have Ian Beggs? Ian Beggs just there, guys. Ian Beggs, and also one from Richard Ogden. And there's a real variety in here, I can tell you. So, John Street, you want to start?
My question is, if you were elected, what would be the subject of your first private members' bill?
That's the biggest ooze of the night for a question. Okay, Ian Beggs.
Yeah. The financial crisis happened when Britain's overmighty finance sector blew a huge credit bubble and it burst. What will you do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Okay, thank you, Ian. And Richard Ogden. Richard Ogden?
Yes, our ward includes Shoreham Harbour, with a lot of fishermen there, and there are other ports around the country. My question to the panel is, what will they do, if elected, to help our fishermen?
Okay, great, thank you. So, first private members bill, how can we stop the financial crisis happening again, and what will you do to help out our fishermen? And it's Tim.
It's me first, right. Today, my private members bill actually came into force, so from today, civil partnerships between opposite-sex couples can take place. My private members bill also gives coroners the power to investigate stillbirths, which is a really important issue as well. And for the first time since 1837, mothers of the bride will be able to add their names to wedding certificates, which amazingly has not been the case. So I got my private members bill through with 4 quite complex areas, and I'm really proud that that has actually happened. And today is the day on which civil partnerships actually start. So I've done it. If I had to do another one, if I come up, when I spent 20 years trying to come up with a ballot for private members bill, there are 2 things I'd like to do. First of all, a private members bill that enables the Parliament to sack the Speaker, because at the moment it is impossible to sack a dud Speaker. And secondly, to end the Fixed-Term Parliaments Act, which has led to part of the chaos that we've got now, where you had the obscene situation where the opposition, who is constantly calling for this government to resign, then won't actually vote for it.
Did you vote for it? Okay. Lavinia.
It's a good question. I've not actually thought about it, but I think if I was to write a private members bill, my private members bill would be that pharmaceutical companies must be held to account for the pricing within our NHS, and we set a price fund for that.
Okay, you've got more time if you want to.
Oh, sorry. What's that the other one about?
So it's about what would you do for fishermen, private members bill, and how will you stop another financial crisis?
Well, the way to stop a financial crisis is to stop the banks from having so much power, because that is the centre of it all, isn't it? There's too much power in a few people's hands, so the government must actually legislate against this ever happening again. And that is what we need to do, because the banks have not learned any lesson for the financial crash. Is actually, the burden of that has been to the poorest people, and we've had to pay for that. We've bailed out the bankers, and they've brought us austerity, and that is the reality of the situation. So we must never let that happen again. And as far as fishermen is concerned, yes, I think it's really important that we do have a fisheries policy, because round the shores of this area, we need to protect our local workers, and the fishing industry is really important, and we need to ensure, should we have any deal within Europe, that it covers the protection of our local fishermen.
Thank you. Ashley.
Okay, so on the private members bill, I've already started writing a mock one, which has taken me quite a long time, and it's on proportional representation. Now, I'm not going to bore you with it because it is too complicated. It currently stands at 8 pages, and that's only 300 of the 650 constituencies. But hopefully by the time we get to the election, if I'm elected, that'll be ready to go as my first bill. As well as that, votes at 16. I know it's a bit premature to vote, to get myself ready, but I feel like I'd rather be there with something to offer than walking around like a headless chicken. On the issue of the financial crash, I think the really important thing is regulating banks. That's really important because they've had a free rein and it shouldn't be allowed. But also, I think It's a shame to me that we've had two parties for over 100 years who've been in majority governments the most, and both parties don't own up to their mistakes on this, and they're both responsible for this. The financial crash didn't come out of out of nowhere. It was a worldwide crash, but it's also exacerbated by the government ignoring advice and also overspending. If they curbed their spending when they were told to, we wouldn't have had a crash. Okay, and it's selective stuff like that I think is very important to remember. Also, I think on the terms of allowing fishermen a proper chance, I think we need to look at ways that we can replenish the fish stock as well, because they need fish to be able to do their job. And at the moment, we're letting, we're having a lot of EU fish. Okay, right.
Okay, sorry. Leslie.
How to prevent the financial crisis regulation, subject of my first private member's bill. Hopefully Caroline's Green New Deal will go through. If it doesn't, I will put that. If it does, I want to make misogyny a hate crime across the UK, and I want to increase the police's capacity to deal with domestic violence. So this is something I've worked a lot on in many countries with human rights organisations. Misogyny has to become a hate crime. So that would be my first bill. Helping the fisher folk. Okay, because there are fisher women as well as fishermen. I did some research on this. The BBC asked me to do an interview last week about our kelp forests. I don't know if any of you have watched Attenborough's programme about how we've decimated our kelp forests. So all around West Sussex, we're quite famous for having these kelp forests, which are incredible for biodiversity. They breed fish, so good for fisher folk, but also they absorb double the amount of CO2 that we're producing. So an amazing thing for us to have. We've got rid of them. That's not good for our fisher folk at all. So I looked up our fisheries policy. We've got pages of fishery policies. This is something, there's obviously some green people who are obsessed with fishing who've done a lot of thinking about this. So one of the things that we've got is we want to give licenses to the fisher folk who actually have sustainable business practices. And we want to monitor that because at the moment the ministry dealing with fisheries actually gives licenses to catch more fish than we actually have. So that's got to be addressed. And again, that's where regulation needs to come in.
Okay, so it's another set of questions. So have we got Sam Coombs in the room? Sam Coombs? Say yes, Sam Coombs? No? Okay. It's a written question, so they must have been here anyway, okay, all right. Tony Bellasis, is it? Tony Bellasis? Just here, can I get a mic down here? And also Paul Kuma as well. Paul Kuma is just there. So there's this guy here and Paul's hand up there. So, Tony, do you want to start?
Sure. In the first half of the evening, we had some great discussions about the climate emergency, and we had good ideas from all the candidates, not surprisingly, perhaps more so from the Green candidate, but they all gave us good answers, I believe. My question is, how will you, as a candidate, if you're successful, get your party to make sure that the poor performing countries in the world actually join the green activity? For example, China and Russia, who are abominable with their pollution. How will you manage to get them to do as much as we are doing in this small little country, just a dot on the planet?
Okay, thank you. And Paul Kuma?
Yes, I had the privilege of looking after Shoreham Food Bank, and in this room also there are some wonderful volunteers from Shoreham Food Bank. And my question is, what will you do to reform the universal credit system? We meet clients almost on a weekly basis who experience massive hardship because of the delay in the paying of their monies. So what would you do to reform? I understand the advantage of combining 6 benefits into one. The idea is good, but the practice is awful for many people's lives. Thank you.
Sam isn't
but there's a very similar question by Wayne Green. I was trying to avoid calling because you've already asked one, but Wayne, because it's a similar question. Wayne?
Yes, it's me. Regarding the local Ada poverty report on young homeless teenagers in Ada in 2016, the report was read by the United Nations. What will you do to resolve local poverty and social cleansing of the poor in the area as a result of the poisonous government policy of austerity?
So it's Lavinia to start this time. So just recap. So basically, what we're going to do about the big polluters of the world. Paul was about universal credit, and the last one is about local poverty and social cleansing.
Well, about the big polluters of the world, I think what we're saying from the Labour Party is that every country, whether we are importing or exporting to, must be held to the highest requirements. We are the countries who should be giving examples to other countries. So import and export is really important that they are also held to the highest examples and the highest possible in the highest possible levels, because climate change does not just affect us and the country or the other countries, but it's about money as well, isn't it? And money should be properly invested in making sure that we are not exporting or importing meat from places such as Brazil, where they're burning the forests. And any areas like this, we must have policies that absolutely include this, and the Labour Party has this in their manifesto. In fact, in terms of food banks, I worked for PCS when, this is a trade union, when the universal credit was first mooted. We told them then what a disaster this was going to be, and now it's come to fruition. It is just awful. People are in penury, and so what we'll be doing is we'll be scrapping universal credit, and we will be replacing it with something that actually benefits people at need, not 5 weeks later.
Ashley.
Okay, so on the issue of getting other countries to do more about the climate, I think there's simple things we can do. We cannot trade with countries that are deliberately harming the climate. It's a very simple thing. If you're going to harm the environment and you're not going to take your responsibility seriously, we won't trade with you. If there is countries that are making an effort but are clearly not pushing enough, we should maybe look at tariffs to do with their, if the country's polluting a lot, we should maybe look at tariffs on their produce. To say, look, that as you improve your environmental credentials, we will drop the tariffs on your country. That's something that could be considered. It's a bit out there, but it's something that we need to start thinking about. Also, on universal credit, it was set up and it hasn't worked. To scrap it, I don't agree with. I think we need to look at reforming it. It needs to work for everyone. We need to reform it so that there is not a waiting time. We need to reform it so that people who are playing the system do not get away with it, because there is vulnerable people who are at need of using this. No, but there are people out there who will use this system, and we need to stop them from doing that. Also, on the poverty report.
Leslie.
Oh gosh, big questions, aren't they? We may be a dot on the planet, but we're doing a lot of polluting, and often we say it's the others, but actually what can we do ourselves, and we can lead by example. As one party, as one country, we're not going to stop Russia. I work with the Russians a lot. We're not going to do that. We do that through the United Nations. And we have an incredible United Nations. We've got a debate going on this week. We're hosting the next COP. So I think as a public, we can support the UN. We can work with the UN. They're the ones who support these international agreements. We're not going to do it by ourselves. So we have to work with others. How would we reform universal credit? We wouldn't reform universal credit. We would get rid of universal credit. We want to introduce what we call a universal basic income, which is an unconditional financial payment that goes to everybody. In terms of social cleansing, gosh, that's such an important issue, isn't it? Social cleansing. It's a word we don't like, but it's happening, and it's happening right here in Shoreham. So I looked at the food bank stats, and I'm so happy people are here, because thank goodness for you, but I wish you weren't here, and you shouldn't be here. We're the 5th richest country in the world. Food bank use in this area, and you can look at it ward by ward, has doubled since 2017. It's doubled since 2017. People are having to choose between feeding themselves and heating themselves. For a long time, Shoreham residents are being forced out of Shoreham. The rental market isn't fit for purpose. People are paying, I know someone who's paying £790 a month to live in a damp studio flat with an extortionate deposit. And if they complain, the response is really simple: leave. The owner knows they can increase the rent for the next tenant. All they need to do, don't fix the damp, put a lick of paint. This is true. And that's why I'm working with colleagues here in Shoreham to set up a Poverty Truth Commission, where we can bring people with lived experience of poverty and decision makers together, so we can start having some absolutely honest conversations. And it's not just the food bank. We need housing caps. We need caps on tenancy agreements.
Big questions there, everyone. Let's just take universal credit. Saying you're going to scrap universal credit and replace it with something is not a policy. I've spent a lot of the last year visiting the benefits office in Worthing. I've taken people who run food banks and clients of food banks to listen and to speak to the people running the benefit system, to hear in practical terms about what isn't working and how they can make the system more user-friendly. I have to say that the office in Worthing has been really impressive in the preparation it did to bring in universal credit, co-locating with housing officers, other council officers in the benefits office to provide a wraparound service. Universal credit is actually bringing £2 billion more in benefits, and if those people had stayed on legacy benefits. With such a huge transformation of the system, it is always going to have problems. There are still problems to be ironed out, but actually I believe that the simplification through universal credit, a wraparound solution with people working for solutions for those people who need universal credit, the 1 million additional people with disabilities we've already got back into work is the way to go. And simply saying we're going to abolish it and come up with something is completely irresponsible.
Okay. So I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to throw some questions out to the floor. So has anyone got any questions? Maybe we'll do two at a time. So you were up here first. Guy here. Yeah, him, and just wait for the mic. And I'm going to... Hello. Lady, just because she's waving so furiously in the yellow. She's obviously got...
A few more ladies. It's a bit
Yeah.
disproportionate.
Okay, well, she's a lady. So, do you want to start? We'll just do two at a time.
Okay, my question, my name's Tony, my question is about political financing. With all the rumours running around about Russian interference in our politics and politics in general in the Western world, should we be allowing Russians and foreign investment in political parties?
Foreign investment, and this lady here. Just coming, Mike.
Thank you very much. My question relates to the Union of Nations, and it is, under what circumstances would each candidate be willing to hold another Scottish referendum?
Okay, nicely local. No, that's good. That's fine. So, Ashley, you would start, and so it's on foreign money in politics, and another vote on Scotland.
On foreign money in politics, I think in Britain we've got a bit lax with where the money's coming from. I think there needs to be proper ways of accounting for money. I think it's too easy for new parties, particularly a party called the Brexit Party, to set up and get a lot of money and we don't know where it's come from. And this is unacceptable. We need to have an account of where everyone's money's coming from, and why that's come about, I don't know. It never used to be the case that you used to get massive donors from abroad who were funding big political parties and it'd be acceptable. But at the moment it seems that that's being brushed aside as long as it helps the party that's getting funded win. And it's not just the Conservatives. I'm sure there's a lot of parties who are dibble-dabbling in this. Also, on the issue on the Union of Nations, I personally think if there was enough and clear support for another referendum in Scotland, you have to listen to the people. That is what democracy is. I love our Union of Nations, but if the people of Scotland don't want to be part of it, you have to respect that. And I personally don't think that another Scottish referendum is something that would be good for this country, but it's for the Scottish people to decide that. And if there's an overwhelming majority for that, then I'll support it.
Should we have political financing from foreign investors? Of course not. It's not a problem the Green Party has. We have no money. We are not backed by big donors. We are not backed by trade unions. We are backed by ordinary people. So we don't have that problem. I don't want to have that problem. And no, obviously we shouldn't be receiving money from outside, and we need much bigger scrutiny. It's a very dangerous issue, and it's a slippery slope that we're on. And again, we need regulation. We need to do something about it. Union of Nations, should we have a referendum? So selfishly, I would love Scotland to always stay, because the leaders' debates would be terrible without having Nicola Sturgeon on them. It's much bigger. Half my family is Scottish. I spent 12 years living in Scotland. I think whether Scotland has a referendum is going to depend a lot on what happens with Brexit. I think that's going to be a huge issue. So I know for my family members, a lot of people who wanted to stay voted to remain in the original referendum. After the Brexit referendum said this time I would leave. So I think let's see what happens with that. But of course I would support a referendum. I would support people's vote. People have the right to decide, and it's completely
I'm doing slightly shorter as there's only 2 questions. Okay, Tim.
Okay, political financing of foreign financing of political parties was outlawed some years ago. There are now very strict rules about having to make declarations as to where the money come from. One thing this government has also done is bringing unexplained wealth orders as well, and we're starting to see prosecutions for people, not least Russian oligarchs, with large amounts of money buying London property and others as well. This is being rooted out. The Union of Nations. Do we really want to spend the next year with having not 1 but 2 referendums about Scotland and about Brexit? Yet further delay, and who knows, if you don't like the result, then apparently we'll have to have another one as well. I think it would be absolutely tragic if we had another referendum in Scotland. Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. It is part of what is British is being about, as is Northern Ireland, as is Wales as well. And if you think that the Northern Ireland border is going to be an issue, if Scotland were to come out and remain part of the EU and the rest of the GB is outside the EU, that will be a tea party compared to the Scottish-England border for trade in the future.
Okay. Right.
Right, I'll take that setting. Yes.
Okay. Okay, you're going to be taking time away from Lavinia, so Lavinia.
Right, thanks very much. The Union of Nations, obviously I am Scottish, but I'm an internationalist, but I don't think it's up to us to tell the Scottish people if they want a referendum or not. And the very answer that Tim's given is a reason why people may want to leave the United Kingdom, because there's 2 things here. There's total separation from the bubble that is Westminster and the rest of the country, but in particularly Scotland feel completely removed from that. So we need to take into consideration what the Scottish people want. This moment in time, 51% say they want to remain, so let's see what happens then. But I do believe Brexit will have a huge impact on it. But let that country have their say. Have a bit of brave heart here.
Okay, thank you.
Political financing foreign investment is a disgrace, and it's happening all the time. There's black money all in the political parties, especially the Tories.
All right. Hang on.
I apologise, not all the political parties.
All right.
What the Tories.
All right. So I can allow 2 more questions, then we'll do summing up, I think. If everyone's ready for that. It's been a long night. Yeah, okay, cool. All right.
They're ready.
Yeah, they're ready. Good. Okay. So, and actually, what I'd be really interested in is hearing from someone who is an undecided voter, right? because they're the people who are actually going to sway it one way or another. So this lady there. Can we get a microphone to her? And anyone else who's undecided voter has got a question. And this guy on the end here. Okay, all right. So it's the lady in the white top there, and the chap with the beard there. Fine beard it is. Okay, great. Shoot.
Hi, my name's Laura. The natural environment seems to be on the lips of many of the political parties at the moment. Apart from tree planting, I'd like to know what your commitments are to the natural environment and what would your priorities be here in this constituency?
Okay, thank you. And this gentleman here.
Many parties claim to be a broad church. Which wing, faction or group best describes you?
Do you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question?
Many parties claim to be a broad church. Which wing, faction or group best describes you?
Okay, all right. It's Leslie.
We don't have factions. I love being in the Green Party because we actually agree on things. So we're very clear. We don't have a faction. So I'm Green Party. That's what I am. That's what we do, and that's an easy one for me. Natural environment. What are our priorities? Okay. Well, first one is to tell the truth and take action and say that we actually do have a big crisis. Our manifesto is anchored in a comprehensive Green New Deal. So in that, we can't just pull out one piece. We need to look at everything. So we need to look at energy, housing, transport industry, food, farming, forestry, incomes. We have the money to do that. We bailed out the banks. It can be done. So priority locally would have to be the kelp forests, because I think the biodiversity that we're losing there is dramatic, not just for the life that's in the water, but for the birds, the seabirds who are outside of the water, also from our CO2, reducing our carbon emissions. Kelp forests soak up the carbon. They're one of the most powerful things that we've got for soaking up the carbon. So we need to regenerate them. Economically, we need them too for our fisher folk to be able to earn their living. So that would probably be my priority number one, but I wouldn't have a priority number one because I'd want to do them all systematically and comprehensively. We can't just do add-on bits. That's what people have been doing for decades. It doesn't work. We need a comprehensive approach.
I'm interested on the kelp forest, which I completely agree. And it's been put down. I've been speaking to local fisher folk on this, and a number of the reasons they've come up with is part of the pair trawling, is part of it. One of the reasons several of them came up with is not enough sewage going into the sea, incredibly. They actually thrive on dirty water, and because we've cleaned up, despite Southern Water's best efforts in the East Worthing sewage treatment plant, that is one reason behind it. One thing I am doing at the moment is working with all the local schools through my eye project, which I set up 12 years ago. So we're trying to network recycling, because we can recycle so much more. And there's a wonderful couple who live up in North Lancing who've turned their garden and their garage into a recycling plant for all the sorts of things you can't put in your recycling bin, like pet pouches, like cosmetic stuff, like crisp packets, which they then recycle for money that goes back into good local causes in the community. I want the whole constituency to be doing that. I want all the schools, and all the schools have been coming to me asking for more recycling bins because they want to expand that, and then everybody can do their bit, and they get the money back from the recycling projects for local good causes as well. I think that's something we can all sign up to. It would be really exciting if this leads on it as well. Faction, I'm a One Nation Tory. I always have been.
Lavinia.
Well, for natural, sorry, can I just, the lights are a bit kind of thing. Which faction do I belong to? I'm a socialist feminist. That's what the faction I belong to. And I believe that socialism is the way forward, and women are the way forward with it. A woman's place is in politics. I also, when we talk about the kelp forest, I actually wrote something for the BBC about the kelp forest, because it's really important that we remember how that is unique to this area. But for me, it's our fantastic beach. We must keep that beach restored constantly.
We must monitor it, especially during the summer months, because we are getting more people using the beach, and we must remind people that that's a conservation area, and we must invest in ensuring our beach is kept to its best and its pristine best, because that's what makes Shoreham.
Ashley. Okay, so on the protecting natural environment, I think one of the big things that we want to do is making a blue belt, which we want 50% of our seas to have a blue belt. This means we protect areas around kelp farms. Now this is really important. I would like that number to go up, but at the moment we don't have a lot of blue belts at the moment, so that's really important. Increasing our national parks, I think that's another thing. We're lucky that we're so close to national parks and that they are well managed and well maintained. There are lots of places in the country where they've not got national parks, and they should be. Also, the last thing also on that is stop deforestation. It's all well and good saying we're going to plant trees, but if they just get chopped down, what's the point in planting them? We need to stop deforestation and actually look at ways we can improve our environment by doing that. And on the issue of what fraction, I'm a liberal, I'm a young liberal. I believe that there are lots of different opinions and values in our country that make us brilliant. And that doesn't mean you're socialist, it doesn't mean you're one nation Tory, it means that you accept everyone's opinions and you take them on board, because there are some good ideas in one nation Tories, a lot of them aren't good, and there are some good in socialists as well. Again, a lot of them aren't good. I'm the middle ground. I take the bits that I like and I also have my own ideas on it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the end of the questions, and so it's going to be like each candidate's going to get a minute to just do a final pitch to you guys for your vote. It's a big election. What have they got? And I'm going to just carry on the order we've been doing, so Tim's going to start.
Okay, we've had a respectful debate this evening. Whatever our differing views on Brexit, on public finance, on the environment or whatever, we need to work together, and we need this country to come back together, whatever happens in Brexit in the next few months, which is why I think we just got to get it done so we can sit down and have a practical relationship. We're trying to have a respectful debate so we can have a practical discussion with our EU friends about what the nature exactly of our relationship will be in the future, because they will remain exceedingly important and we need to remain as close and as friendly with them as possible. Only when we have got that done, I'm afraid, can we get back to the really important people's priorities. The things we've been talking about this evening around education and fairer school funding, making sure that it's not just Worthing that is the best hospital in the country as it is, a hospital which the last Labour government tried to downgrade 12 years ago, and not a single Labour councillor or Labour officer joined the Quash campaign to save it all those years ago. Those are the priorities that local people in this constituency want, and that's what we need to get back to after we sorted out Brexit.
Lavinia.
This general election is an election of the century, I would say, for us. I have never seen such a divided nation. I have never seen people divided within their own households, because everything stems around Brexit. But Brexit is not the only issue. Our country is on its knees. Let's give our country some hope, some aspiration for the future. Only the Labour Party can deliver this, because we reduced the majority of the Conservatives to 5,106 votes. We can do this time, folks. The Labour Party is the way forward. We are the People's Party. We are speaking on behalf of the people. People want real change now. Let's vote for the future. Let's vote for hope. Let's vote for our children. Let's get this done and get a better future for everyone. Vote Labour on the 12th of December.
So, the reason why I'm here is because I think that young people should have a voice, and I think it's amazing to see. I'm not the only 18-year-old candidate, there are others in the country, but it's brilliant to see more and more of them take part. And that's the biggest thing I want to do. Obviously, I'd love to win this seat, and that's what I want, to be your next young Liberal Democrat MP, to give young people a voice. And I know Labour like to say they're the real party for change, but as far as I'm concerned, it's been Labour or Conservative for the last 100 years. So if you want change, vote for anyone that's not them. So that's that, you know. I think also there is a real time to change politics, and tactical voting needs to stop. And if you want a proportional representation and your vote to count, then vote for me.
This election is about our values as a society that has sleptwalked into a climate emergency, into escalating poverty, and that has brought an incredible NHS and education system to its knees. It does not have to continue in this way. This is all the result of political choices made by the dominant parties. Now is the time to change the voting habits of a lifetime and make a different political choice. Make a choice for a party that you can trust, a party that is honest, a party that has never been afraid to tell the truth. You've seen Caroline Lucas do this time and time again. Look at what she has achieved as one MP. Imagine what we could do with more MPs. So please vote for a party that you can trust to keep its promises, to challenge the lies that are doled out like penny sweets, and to keep other parties honest. This election could be the last chance we have to take the radical action the science demands and to transform our failing welfare state. Our planet cannot vote, our children cannot vote, but you can. Please use your vote and vote Green 2019 for a future worth inheriting.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end. Thank you very much for coming. I know it's been a long evening. I know you've waited for a long time in the heat. Can I have a round of applause, because there's been loads of people who have been involved in this behind the scenes. People doing flyering, people doing posting in here, all the floor through, all people doing questions. There's been about 20 people behind us today. And thank you also to the Ropetackle. This is a charity place, so support your local arts venue. And anything you want to add?
I get to end this, right. Thank you to all the candidates for putting yourselves up here, because it's quite scary and it's very warm, and I would like you to give a little wave and a cheer to the people at the Crown and Anchor who could not make it. So hi to you at the Crown and Anchor. I always wanted to do that. That's great. Now, this hustings would not have happened without a chance email and a chance meeting all happening within 30 minutes of each other. And I'd like to thank Alistair from FAST, and very importantly, Anne Younger from Extinction Rebellion, for joining with the Shoreham Society and using all our various connections with other groups to make this event happen. I mean, this is how community really works. I'd like a little bit of feedback. We're thinking about doing something similar for the local elections in May. Anybody interested? Excellent. Right, we'll try and make that happen. The other thing is, on your way out, if you haven't put a pound in the bucket, that's really just to cover the costs of putting this event on. We can't really do it for free, but we could. Any excess will go to Turning Tides, which is the Church's Worthing Homeless. Right, now, so all that's left to do... so are you guys appearing on the 9th of December together? Shoreham Academy. They're doing it again. 2 o'clock, Shoreham Academy, 9th of December. I don't know if everybody's invited, are they? Oh, there you go. So, all that's left to do now is to reflect on this evening and cast your vote on the 12th. Right, so thanks again for coming, and have a safe journey home.